where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC-7 Extra Sunday edition. Today, a special edition of ABC-7 Extra as we take you to the groundbreaking of the Children's Museum. In 2012, voters approved a quality of life bond that included 3 projects. One of those, the Children's Museum. But however, only $19.5 million were approved for that. So the people who wanted this museum got creative and they raised funds. They raised private funds and certificates of obligation to build this museum, which gets us to where we are now, the groundbreaking. Joining us to talk about this very special project is Elaine Molinar, one of the architects. And thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. What's the name of the organization you're with?
Snohetta.
I want to make sure that I pronounce it right. Talk to me about what went into designing this children's museum.
Well, it was a really fun process. We came to the site to see it firsthand because it's very difficult to design for a place that you have not been and experienced. So that gives a lot of added value to the process. We had a very intense period during the ideas competition with our design team in our studio. We build a lot of study models. We like to work with our hands in our workshop. So we have a kind of a great affinity with a lot of the activity that's going to happen inside the museum because we are very used to working with our hands to generate ideas.
One of the best descriptions that I heard of what the design is, what it looked like, is that it's shaped like a cloud so that a child can walk in, feel like his head is in the clouds, but his feet on the ground. Explain that for me.
Yeah, I think the design of the building is meant to spark the imagination and to create associations and memory with the physical space that the kids find themselves in. It's meant to be a tool for the imagination, and creating associations to familiar objects and phenomena is a very big part of that.
So it's going to be very hands-on too.
Yes.
Can you explain about that?
Well, there are going to be a lot of exhibits in the museum, and we have an exhibit designer called Gyroscope who has been designing those exhibits. The main feature, which I think will be a big attraction for the museum, is called a climber. It's the sky's the limit climber, and it's probably about 50 feet tall, a little over, maybe 60 feet tall, and it gives an opportunity for kids to get really physical, to try and figure out how to negotiate their movements from bottom to top, because it will have a lot of variety, a lot of different ways of moving, crawling, climbing, walking, all kinds of things, and it will give opportunity also for pausing and looking out the windows and seeing the beautiful mountains in the distance, and to just get lost in physical activity.
So essentially it required a rewind in the architect's head of what it was like to be a child?
Well, I think as architects, many of us are constantly thinking about spatial relationships and thinking back to when we were children ourselves. Although, now this has been a great opportunity to kind of really focus on that and focus what this place will be like for children.
And this takes on a special meaning for you because you're a native El Paso and you graduated from Coronado High School. Did you take that into account when you think about, El Paso children, what do they need? What do we want to provide?
In some ways, yes. I think El Paso is a beautiful city. Of course, it has a beautiful mountain desert landscape, which sits very, very close to me and my frame of reference. And imagining a museum that would have that kind of familiar landscape to it, even inside the building. So not only is there a discovery garden with native plantings and rock formations, but inside there's a lot of opportunity for having grand vistas of getting up high and looking down and looking up and feeling almost like you're outside.
For a lot of us, especially, and for the majority of folks, our viewers, we're trying to imagine what more or less it will look like. Can you give me a point of reference as to what you all took into consideration when you were designing it?
Many things. We spend a lot of time talking and a lot of time remembering what were meaningful experiences as children, and things like stories that reference climbing, like a Jack and the Beanstalk, climbing up that beanstalk and arriving at an unknown place through the clouds. That was a big inspiration, or just playing in a tree house, things like that. So that's really what came to mind, to have to create a sense of uplift in that building, that sense of floating. I think we all, even as adults, love to just look up at the sky and imagine what the clouds look like.
Right, yeah, and the forms that they take.
Right.
Yeah. Was it challenging by virtue of the fact that it's right dab in the middle of downtown? And of course, we've got the convention center, and we've got the Plaza Theater next to us. Was that a challenge, and how did you overcome it?
I think that's what makes it so great. It's so exciting. There couldn't have been a more dramatic location for this building. Even its location next to the Amtrak, the trains. I mean, trains are a source of fascination for many, many kids, and having the opportunity to get close to the tracks like that is kind of exciting. I think a museum like this belongs in this context with so many public cultural institutions. You have the Plaza Theater, the Art Museum, the History Museum, and the ballpark. I think it's perfectly situated here and is a great complement to downtown.
Being the fact that you're a native El Pasoan, tell me about what this would have meant to you had you had something like this when you were growing up.
I think it would have been wonderful. I mean, these places didn't really exist the way they do now when I was a kid. I think it would have been tremendous fun.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, Ms. Molinar.
Thank you very much.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the dollars that it took to build this museum, or at least to get us to the groundbreaking. We'll talk to Eric Pearson with the El Paso Foundation, El Paso Community Foundation. This is ABC-7 Extra, where news comes first. We'll be back.
As we speak, many of our fellow El Pasoans are without a job. Our population is stagnant as people flee some of the highest taxes in the state. Property valuations are rising dramatically to pay for a mountain of debt as decisions are made to benefit special interests instead of yours. We cannot afford to continue. We face many challenges, but together we can make the right decision to set El Paso back on a healthy course. May you remain safe and well. I'm Xtra, and I approve this message.
The unknown is not empty. It's a storm that crashes and consumes, replacing thought with worry. But one thing can calm uncertainty: an answer, uncovered through exploration, teamwork, and innovation. An answer that leads to even more answers. Mayo Clinic. You know where to go.
El Paso, let's keep going and stay strong. Our leaders are working for our future. Working to bring our families more places to go, major events and entertainment. Making El Paso a destination city to attract new jobs. Best of all, our future is right around the corner. Just keep going and stay strong.
Why are Nancy Pelosi and the liberals spending millions for Xochitl Torres Small? Because she sides with them. Xochitl Torres Small voted with them to kill our energy jobs. And Torres Small signed up for Biden's agenda. His radical tax plan would be the largest tax hike in history, raising taxes on everyone, slowing growth, killing jobs, taxing working families. We can't afford Xochitl Torres Small. The NRCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Joining us to talk about dollars and cents and exactly what it took to build, or at least get us to where we are now, the groundbreaking of the El Paso Children's Museum, is Eric Pearson with the El Paso Community Foundation. Thanks so much for taking time to talk to us.
Thanks for having
me. Let's talk about exactly what it took. You actually were talking about the quality of life bonds that was passed in 2012, and then actually approving 3 projects, one of them being the Children's Museum. It turns out that only $19.5 million were approved for the construction of this museum. However, you all were able to raise the funds. How?
Well, you know, there's a lot of belief in this project. We think that this touches on everything: economic development, education of our children. It inspires people, and I think the building that we have is going to inspire people. I think more important than the bricks and mortar is the hope that it brings, and it really touches on a whole bunch of things. And so when you talk about why this project is easy to raise money for, it's because it's really talking about our kids and the future, and who doesn't want our kids to have a better future. Sure. So we've had a tremendous response from a whole bunch of people in town who are willing to step up and make this happen, and we're very grateful to them.
Speaking of bricks and mortar, every brick costs, so much. So how were you able to raise money? It was 19.5. What happened then? Certificates of obligation. Then how much was raised privately?
Well, so actually that 19.5 is half of what the city ended up putting into it. We went out and the foundation paid for a master plan by a group called Gyroscope, which does museum exhibits for children's museums around North America. And they came back with a master plan and said, 19 million is great. This is not going to get you what you really want. And what we really want, what we deserve in this community is a world-class museum. And so we said, what would it take? And we looked at it very carefully, and we came up with a much larger budget. And we were able to take that back to the city of El Paso and say, if you increase what you're doing, we will not only put 50 cents for every dollar you give, we'll give 75 cents for every dollar you give. So it became a $40 million, $30 million equation. And so the city stepped up like it should have, and the private side really stepped up, and we were able to raise that money because people knew that the city was committed, and the citizens of El Paso were committed. The bond issue passed by 71% in 2012.
People wanted this.
Yeah, and they were tired of waiting. That was 2012. It's 8 years later, and about 2016 is when we got involved, and we were really talking about trying to put this on the front burner and get it moving a little bit faster, and I believe we succeeded in doing that. But these things take a lot of time, so it also bought us some time to raise money, and there are a lot of people in this town who are committed to our children, committed to education, committed to economic development, committed to tourism, committed to things that will, across the spectrum, improve the way we live. And that's why it was easy to raise money. And you asked how we did it, we asked.
Yeah, simply asking. You were able to raise, El Paso Community Foundation and private entities were able to raise $30 million. However, that's going to be spaced out. Do you want to talk about that? Because it's not all one big chunk at once, right?
No, that's correct. A lot of folks are giving over the course of 10 years. So what we'll have to do is figure out a way to do some gap funding to make sure that our cash flow is positive during that time. So it'll cost us a little bit of money in interest payments. But we've done this before. We did it with the Plaza Theater, which was a $24.2 million commitment by the El Paso Community Foundation. And so we're familiar with finance and making sure that we're able to leverage those pledges into money that we need now.
El Pasoans are now accustomed to saying, hey, we approve so much, but it's going to cost even more. Let's say this costs more than what you all have planned out, the $50 million. Well, actually 40 and 30, 70. So let's say, for instance, it turns out to be more than that. What happens next?
Well, we're not going back to the city. We've already told taxpayers this is it. We've come up with what we think is a formidable master plan, a beautiful building, all for the bargain basement price of $70 million. If it goes over that, we're going to have to cover the difference. And I think the architects have done such a wonderful job, and that it's going to inspire the private side to step up again.
Yeah. Can we talk about some of the people who stepped up to beef up some money?
Actually, we're going to be making some announcements, and I don't want to leave anybody out, and I don't want to include people who are not ready for it yet. So if you don't mind, I'd rather just hold off. But I will tell you that the people who founded this project, TransTelco, Miguel and Rodrigo Fernandez, the El Paso Community Foundation and its donors, the James, Janie, and Mark Keating Fund, the Troller Funds, the Walter Hightower Funds were the folks that are giving from the El Paso Community Foundation, and also the Hunt family, Gail and Woody Hunt Family Foundation, have given big and pledged big. And those are people that I'm happy to announce. We're not announcing amounts, but those are the core people who really didn't just put their treasure into it, but put their time. We have Josh on the board, we have El Paso Community Foundation on the board, we have Miguel Fernandez on the board. So those are people who have given and really tried to be stewards of this project, not only from a monetary perspective, but from their wisdom and their belief in the project.
So going to their belief in the project, because that's a lot of money that they're putting up. What do you say to them? What is the ask?
Thank you.
Yeah, but what is the ask? What do you say to them to cough up some money? That's a lot of money.
I say, please give us some money. And actually, we don't ask. You know, those folks came to us and said, we need to do this better, and I'm willing to help. And I said, we're willing to help too. You know, we are trying to leverage their ideas into something greater through cooperation, and that's the biggest part of it. You know, how do you ask people for money? You ask them for money, and if they want to do it, they'll do it, and if they don't, they won't. And that's been my experience throughout this. I think the key here is that this project speaks for itself. It really speaks volumes about our commitment to the future of our community, the future of our architectural skyline, and more importantly, the future of our children's education. How can you go wrong?
Okay, El Paso, with the El Paso Community Foundation, Eric Pearson, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us for a very important project. And we'll be back. We'll take another closer look at exactly what the El Paso Museum will look and what it'll offer to children when we come back. This is ABC-7 Extra.
In Santa Fe, Yvette Harold took perks to the next level, jet-setting across the country and racking up $100,000 in taxpayer-funded expenses. Harold even voted to exempt herself from cuts to her own benefits. But Harold did vote to cut teachers' retirement benefits. Even voted to cut unemployment relief for those out of work. Yvette Harold's in it for the perks. We pay the price.
DCCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Dealing with something a bit uncomfortable? No, not him. Hemorrhoids? They could be a real pain in the... Well, you know. Don't you think it's time you did something?
If you've been suffering from internal hemorrhoids diagnosed by endoscopy, the doctors at Advantage IR can help.
Book a free consultation today and discover how you can get relief fast. We accept most insurance and Medicaid. Give us a click at AdvantageIR.com to find out more. Life has enough pains. You don't need any more. Advantage IR, your surgery alternative.
As our region continues to face financial difficulties due to the pandemic, El Paso Electric is here to put you in contact with the support you may need. Our partners at Project Amistad offer utility bill assistance to low-income customers that live within El Paso city limits. For New Mexico customers, the New Mexico Human Services Department may also be able to provide help with bill payment. It's important that you call us to learn about all the payment options and resources available to you. For a full list of customer assistance programs, please visit epelectric.com.
After getting shot during a mission in Afghanistan, you'd have thought I'd seen the worst. But here we are. Families on lockdown, communities torn apart. Because Washington politicians like John Cornyn made the wrong decisions early on, worried more about politics than saving lives. Well, I'm MJ Hagar, and I'll listen to the experts and fight for quality, affordable health care for every Texan. I approved this message because my mission isn't finished until all of our families are safe.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this project is the interim director of the Children's Museum, Stephanie Otero. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. Let's talk a little bit more about the museum and what it took to get here. You had a lot of community involvement, right?
We did. We started with 32 public meetings, and we did those public meetings in two different ways. We did all calls where we went to libraries, community centers, and anybody who wanted to show up and give us their opinion could. We also made sure we were very calculated to talk to every stakeholder that would have an interest in what this museum looked like and what it would be for our city.
When you were talking to the community, what was the overall sentiment? What was the need that they believed or the things that needed to go into this museum?
Yes, so obviously they wanted a children's museum, and for those that have been to children's museums before, there's sort of the children's museum model and the science center model. And what we heard loud and clear across this community is that they wanted a hybrid, which is actually something that you're seeing across the country right now, these hybrid children's museum science centers, where there are going to be dedicated areas for birth to 3 and 4 to 7, but most of the museum will be science zones that have early childhood development areas within the zone. So we're really able to honor and engage visitors from birth to 100.
Yeah. Speaking of engaging visitors, we have a lot of different, populations here in El Paso, and we talk about inclusivity. You want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. Inclusivity has been at the core of the planning for this museum, and not just the inclusivity that most people think of, which is mobility issues. We don't want there to be any social, cultural, language, mobility, sensitivity to light, sound, to prevent anyone from wanting to come in our museum. We want everybody to have the museum feel like it's for them. And so there are accessible routes for those that have mobility. We're going to have sensory backpacks for young children that have sensory sensitivities to light and sound. We'll have areas of the museum that get turned down at certain times of the day. We want everybody to feel comfortable, and the museum will be completely bilingual, and we like to say bicultural, because they will not be literal translations that you often see in these museums. We have a team that's working together to make sure that the translations are culturally appropriate and that the learning that can happen in whatever language you speak.
Who are you teaming up with to try to tackle some of these challenges?
So we have a wonderful partnership with the Paso del Norte Development Center, and the therapists on their staff have been so kind to give of their time and come to meetings and meet with Gyroscope and look at design references and look at design drawings and give their input to ensure that we make this a museum for all.
Let's talk about some of those designs, because we were talking, obviously, we were talking to Eric Pearson a short while ago. Tell me about what the designs for some of these exhibitions are, and one that stands out for you the most.
Well, I can't lie. My favorite is the climber. I mean, this 60-foot, 4-story climber is going to be the iconic moment when you come in this museum. But there are 10 unique zones, each that have a theme. We're really excited to partner with La Rotadora across the border, so we will have an exhibit that will be mirrored in both museums so that children across the border, no matter what the line says, can interact with each other. We're going to have zones about weather, about water, about sound waves, about the desert, about animal habitats, becoming a veterinarian. It's really a museum that has something for everyone.
But you were talking about having different exhibitions for different age groups. Talk about maybe the toddlers or the younger ones. What are you going to have for them?
So for our birth to 3, we have an area called Desert Bloom, and it's sort of a take on our beautiful blooms that we see in the desert, but also a child that's blooming. And it will be a protected area where our crawlers and our rollers and our early walkers can learn and have gross motor skill activities, fine motor skill activities. There's going to be an interactive sandbox, a barrel cactus that we can do activities with moms and their caregivers. And right next to it is an area for our 4 to 7-year-olds that will be all
I know
about
that
animals.
because I have a granddaughter that's 5 years old.
There you go. So this will be perfect for her. So it's all about animals. In traditional children's museums, you see grocery stores or farmers markets. We wanted to do something completely unique. And I want to take a moment and say that every single exhibit in this museum has been uniquely designed for El Paso. You cannot go anywhere else in the world and have any of these experiences. But our 4 to 7-year-olds will get to pretend to be animals, put on costumes, create forts, habitats, and then they can learn the other side, which is they can pretend to be veterinarians and learn how to care for animals. And there's going to be MRI machines and X-ray machines and really cool things to do as veterinarians.
But also the Children's Museum won't just, a lot of the events are not just going to be in the Children's Museum. You have some sort of extension where you're going to reach out to the community. Elaborate on that, please.
Absolutely, yes. And that really came from the city's vision that we could create experiences that can be brought out into the community in different parks. On the 3rd floor of the museum, there's a wonderful exhibit about flight, and the kids are going to learn how to do really intricate paper airplanes, and we're going to have fun obstacle courses. And one of the ideas that the city manager had was to create giant obstacle courses in community parks, and the kids can take what they learned in the museum about creating their airplane. There's going to be all kinds of ways for them to figure out, how can they make it fly faster, higher, slower, lower, and then go out into these community obstacle courses and fly. And that's just one of many different outreach programs we will have.
Okay. And when will the museum open? When is it scheduled to open?
It is scheduled to open fall of 2022.
Wow, that's amazing. Stephanie Otero, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us. You heard it. Fall of 2022, you'll be able to bring your children to the Children's Museum. This has been ABC-7 Extra Sunday Edition. I'm Saul Saenz. Good night y buenas noches.